With the February release of IBM Developer for ZOS, we now provide 48 Model Context Protocol tools directly with the editor. Because we are utilizing Zoo Explorer APIs, you do not need to have to install anything else on ZOS to give your AI access to your datasets, Unix files, or jobs. In this release, we also added the ability to query was deploy on your ZOS system for the status of your deployments using the same ZOE-based interaction protocols. In addition to using these tools to interact with the OS, we are providing MCP for various development tools that are part of the IDZ on VS Code and ZOpen Editor solution, such as the ability to perform linter-like code scans, format your source code, run a user build of the files that you're currently editing, and much more. So let's have a look at some of these tools in action using IBM Bob. In IBM Bob, we can see now that the Open Editor is installed and I got Zoe configured. I got access through Zoe to my datasets, Unix files, and jobs. We also enabled the MCP capabilities. In the gallery for MCP provided by Bob, you can see all the tools available around the interaction with the OS, the interaction with the Open Editor, as well as various other capabilities such as user build, ZCodeScan, or the deploy. So let's get started with our first query, just to access data sets on MVS by asking it to retrieve those for a particular naming schema and then grouping them based on the type as well as sorting them by the reference date. Every interaction with ZOS can be individually made available or disabled, but also you can configure if these should be approved by the end user. So you want to make sure any interactions with the OS system are correct and don't accidentally produce any harm. So you want to ensure that you do not allow to automatically have these executed by the editor. And those are things that then can be configured and shared as part of the connection information in Git with your entire team, that all the rules of asking for approval or not are standardized within the organization. So I'm approving the access to my datasets, and it found 13 datasets. And in addition to getting the list in the Zoe Explorer, you can see now I get a nice presentation of all the other attributes being found, the grouping that I requested, as well as the sorting that I wanted to have. Just to give you another example, in addition to accessing those resources, we also integrated interactions with was deploy. So it will execute basically in the MCP implementation command line tools that get executed on my USS system. I have access now to the historical data of my was deployments, the so-called evidence indexes, and I can now query these with various MCP tools. For example, here I'm asking for a particular environment, the production environment, as well as the history based on the artifacts that are being deployed. It will perform two queries on the artifacts to get to the information and then give me a nice presentation of the results. So I have immediate access to these types of resources using the tools provided. In addition to interacting with the OS, we also provide various tools for development activities. At first, we of course need to make sure that the development environment is set up correctly. So we're bringing in MCP tools that help us diagnose issues, perhaps in setting up the environment and the editor. So in this example, we open up a COBOL program and a particular copybook was not being found. But for editing and manipulating this program, we need access to this copybook so that we can utilize the declarations from there. So I can ask Bob now to check why it did not find the copybook, and the file that is responsible for defining those dependencies, where to find things, is a zap YAML file, and we taught it how to fix it. So it will investigate now by reviewing the ZOpen editor log. So it knows there's a tool that has access to the log that logs finding these types of files, and we saw that this was an auto-approved activity because it just accesses a local file, and then it gives me very detailed analysis of all the things it did to try to find the copybook and why it did not do that. And there are two options that it found in the ZAP file that could have caused the problem. But I know that actually this copybook was supposed to be in this data set, so I wanted now to follow plan B to correct the problem. We will therefore modify my settings, because as you will see, there's a variable defined called high-level qualifier that was set to the wrong value, IBM user instead of my username, P. Haumer. And we'll now be able to modify and fix this. And then it will try the operation again. And now you can see the file was found. Another productivity tool that's part of the Open Editor and IBM VS Code is IBM ZCodeScan, technology that's integrated into the editor that provides you with linting capability based on a set of rules customizations. So it ships with over 300 rules out of the box, but you can customize which of the rules should actually apply to your current project by selecting the rules by name, giving the severity, even having special conditions in here to when a rule should apply or not. And we added an MCP interface, so Bob can access now the outcome of this linting and help us with fixing, but also perhaps even explaining the issues here. So I'm asking now Bob through the MCP tool available to run the scan again and then give me an explanation of the impact on the high severity issues only. So we're currently only interested in why missing end clauses are actually important. So you can see it will perform the MCP tool and then read the file and cross-reference the information with the large language model and then giving me an explanation. So you can see it will provide me now for the high severity issues an example while the rule was violated and then detailed explanations on what the impact is and why this should be fixed. However, now combining the MCP tools with the power of agent-based technologies makes us really powerful. I added now an agents MD file to this project that explains really the rules of the game, and some of these capabilities we already utilized when we were finding our copybooks. I have the description of what the ZAP files are, even pointed to the documentation and the schema. The schema has natural language descriptions of every property in it, so it can actually utilize that to understand the ZAP file and react accordingly. Similar, we have a similar schema for code formatting, and we can use Bob to write code formatting files for us using this information. And now the quality scan. I explain here how the quality scan works, that there are these two MCP tools available to Bob, but also where the information is, that there's a customization in place, that there are certain rule files. An example is the file that we just looked at, plus the schema behind the rule files that Bob can use to try to understand it. And now I can ask it even questions about a technology that it doesn't know and an MCP tool that it doesn't have, utilizing now this agent's information by now understanding, hey, there is a rule files that specifies what's being active here, and it can list out now the rules out of all the rules that are defined for ZCodeScan in general, the ones that are active here, and it gives me that specific context now with that. And then moving on, I can define now how you would build the application if I would fix a problem and I would try to build it again, as well as where to find the logs to analyze that the build is successful, and then also even how to run the program after I've made changes to it by submitting a JCL using an MCP tool to do so, to then run the program, get the spool files back, and analyze the results. So if I now switch into a new mode, the Bob planning mode, I wanted to ask it now actually to create a complete workflow for me end-to-end for these types of quality reviews with fixing, building, and testing, that I can utilize not only for this one program, but perhaps for many, many other programs as well. So I ask Bob now to create a plan for scanning an open COBOL program, reviewing the results with the end user, asking which issues to fix, to perform the fixes, and then run a user build checking the logs for issues, followed by running the application to ensure it still works. So it's quite a complex ask now, but with the information that I've given Bob through the agents file and how the different pieces work, it can now basically create this complex workflow for me on doing all of these steps for me. As you can see, it's planning the scanning, fixing, build, and run workflow. It will create even a diagram in here of how the workflow will be performed, if problems are found or not problems are not found, and then giving me a very detailed description of what's it actually going to do for each of those steps. You can see building, accessing the logs with user build, submitting jobs, and so on. So now I got a detailed plan on how to do this. I could ask Bob now to write this plan out, or the other thing that I've done, I actually created a new mode called COBOL QR build and run mode. So I prepared this already beforehand just to save some time, and then I wrote out all these steps into this custom mode that I can utilize now, that describes exactly all the steps that are part of the plan, as well as now with the agent information, what JCL to use for running the program, how to report the results, and so on. So let me switch back now to this new mode that got created, COBOL QA plan and run, and go through these steps together. Let's open up a program again. So we've not fixed any issues here earlier, right? We only looked at the issues now, and now I can ask Bob to perform the scan, fix, build workflow on the open program. And now Bob will be entirely guided by this workflow now to perform all of these steps. So we'll list out now a to-do list with all the things to do. So running the code scan again would be the first step. It performs the MCP tool, run on the current file, and then present the issues to me to fix. And I only want to fix a high severity one, so we will focus on those. But it will show me all the issues that I found, fix all high severity issues as recommended. It could have also fixed the medium ones at the same time, just to keep the demonstration simpler. Going through now the proposals. So now it's used the LLM to propose the code changes. And again, this is a simple example. It only puts those and clauses here at the end. I'm saving this change to confirm these. It will actually run another code scan. And I can see in the problems view that the red icon's already gone because those problems were fixed now. And now it will perform a code formatting using the code formatting rules. We have not looked at those, but it will perform basically this MCP tools that will utilize the predefined code formatting rules within this repository. And then it will ask me to run the user build. So now we'll use dependency-based build as we have documented in the agents files to now build this program. It has a program name in here and will execute this MCP tool. This now starts this user build program capability in the Open Editor. As you can see, the progress bar in here, it's uploading this program, it's uploading the copybooks that are included into this program, and then run the build, and then retrieve the log files from the builds and analyze these for any issues. It found an issue. So it basically found that that there was a problem with the record length, and that's something I deliberately added in here to make sure we have some other things to show. So in the build log, that's something that really the editor cannot find by itself, but the build found this issue in here, that there was a problem with the record length of this imported copybook. If I go to the definition, you can see in here that the file length it was 500, so Bob already is in the process of fixing it, but it was supposed to be 387. How did Bob already figure out it should be 387? It was actually now looking at the copybook and then utilizing the byte counting method to sum up all the bytes needed for the record. So it computed this all by itself and suggested now the right byte count that I can now approve and save from 500 to 387, and we'll now run the build again to make sure that the problem is gone. I will forward this to make this appear quicker. The second user build has now completed, and Bob determines that this earlier warning has now been eliminated. And now I can move on to the next step to actually submit the JCL that executes the program together with its test data via the MCP tool Zoe submit dataset to check that the program still runs. And the submit returns a job ID, and it immediately knows about that, and then can use that job ID to query the spool files. It knows which spool files to look. It looks at the message as well as the sysout. And then basically it says all of these looked okay. There was all good return codes, and it can summarize the results. It will now show me that it fixed these issues. It found an issue during the build and then ran the build again, and the final execution of the program showed also all good return codes. So you can see we run a complete end-to-end workflow that was encoded in this custom mode that is now entirely repeatable. I was using a small example file in here, but I can reapply this now to many other programs that I'm editing, utilizing this skill that we've taught the editor now together with our MCP tools to run these types of workflows in a repeated fashion. Thank you very much for your attention, and let me know what you think.